For many years, I used to ask myself a question over and over again. The question was, why on earth am I writing wine tasting notes? Now, I knew what I was meant to do. I've done all the exams. You describe the appearance of the wine in the glass. You then go on to detail the aromas that you can smell whilst swirling it around. Take a mouthful, slosh it around a bit, suck the air through it and breathe that sort of winey fumes out of your nose so you get a more accurate assessment, and then you write the whole thing down. But what for? Because what I found was that people weren't that interested necessarily in what it was that I was tasting, especially if they weren't tasting the same thing at the same time. Or they didn't know what to do with the information that I told them, frequently both actually. But over time I came up with the idea of the 3 Fs, and these were the things that people found either interesting or useful in tasting notes. The Fs were feeling, flavour and function. Let's start with feeling. Anyone who's done a wine qualification, any sort really, will have been told that you have to be precise when you're describing wine characteristics. You have to avoid using vague or emotional terms. Interestingly, a few years ago, a UK wine importer asked 10,000 people what words enticed them to buy wine. The words people liked were things like fruity, but also smooth, full-bodied, velvety, aromatic, rich, elegant. What most of these words had in common is that they described texture, how the wine feels. And there seems to be a reason for that. Words that describe how something feels to us as humans also often describe human qualities. Now, it's something that's backed up by other research. Rosario Caballero and Ernesto Suarez Toste of the University of Castilla-La Mancha, they studied 12,000 wine tasting notes. Now, they concluded that most of the time we personify wine. It has character, it's endowed with human virtues and vices. It can be generous, sexy, voluptuous, whimsical, shy, demure, bold or aggressive. We almost cannot conceive wine without personifying it. A couple of years ago I worked for a company where we wanted to test this theory really. So we set up an experiment. It cost a few $100s actually, it wasn't expensive. We advertised online articles about wine on Google, and we used Google Ads, but we used them in 3 different conditions. So let's say the article was about Rioja. So in the first condition, we'd say that the wine featured in the article was smooth and supple. It was a feeling or a textural descriptor. In the second condition, we'd say the wine featured in the article was scented with strawberries and oak. It was a traditional tasting descriptor, really. Then in the third condition, we would say that the wine featured in the article was perfect for a family celebration. So it was much more of a functional or I guess a use case descriptor. The results when they came in were clear. 3 times as many people clicked on that first texture condition than the ads that described flavours. And the click-through rate for that final functional or kind of use case descriptor was still about twice as high as the descriptor that came with tasting notes. Now, in a sense, we can understand part of the reason why. As it turns out, humans have very serious limitations in identifying more than a couple of aromas. There's very strong research in that, and we're not actually very good at putting names to them. So does that mean that we shouldn't ever use flavour descriptors? The answer very clearly actually is no. When we went and offered people descriptors that lacked any kind of flavour note, people said they wanted a flavour note. But what was interesting is they just didn't engage with it particularly. We love wine for its flavour, so if you're talking about it, we need to mention it. But we also need to remember it's impossible to meaningfully and accurately describe flavour components in more than about 3 or 4 words, and we should probably limit ourselves to maybe 1 or 2. So then we ask, what does the wine do for us? it doesn't just give us a nice taste, it fulfills a whole panoply of functions. For a start, we drink wine at a lot of different occasions, mostly with our evening meal, but also relaxing in front of the TV or out with friends or after work or as some sort of celebration. And why we drink, that changes too. Mostly it's because we're tired. About 40% of the time we enjoy a glass of wine, and it's because we're done in and we just want to relax. But almost a third of the time we want a bit of a treat, a bit of me time, because I'm worth it. And 15% of the time it's because it's part of how we socialise with our friends. We also express ourselves through wine. Sometimes we even use wine to express who we want to be. There are the obvious functions of wine. It's a great wine for a barbecue, it goes with a steak. It's suitable for a celebration. In many ways, it's more useful to describe the benefit a wine brings you, not the features of the wine. It can even be the wine I go to when I feel I need a bit of a luxury after a pig of a week. That's actually a more truthful and accurate description for most people than thinking and saying, this wine tastes of kumquat. Whenever I try to describe a wine now, I have those 3 F's in the back of my mind. It's a rich, velvety wine with a lovely curranty aroma, and it's the sort of thing I love to have with a roast for a family Sunday lunch. It's actually a lot shorter than most tasting notes, but you'll also find it's a lot more useful.